from the Bindle Group in Ayr, Queensland, with direct ties to Cherbourg Aboriginal Mission. Helen is a health professional and academic who practices a holistic approach to improving health and wellbeing outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders Victorians. Her work has been wide-ranging and varied, and always with a focus on helping the Aboriginal community. She worked for Link Up Queensland Aboriginal Corporation as the Social, Emotional and Wellbeing Counsellor, at the City of Melbourne in Public Policy, at Monash University in the Aboriginal Research Unit, and for the AFL as a mentor. That's quite a history, isn't it? She has also worked with Aboriginal youth in the justice system. Now Helen works at Peninsula Health at Frankston Hospital and in the wider community as Elder and Cultural Lead after 4 years as the Aboriginal Hospital Liaison Officer. Helen is a board member of Willamaraine and was inducted into the Victorian Aboriginal Honour Roll in 2019 in recognition of her life's work in health, academia and reconciliation. Welcome, Aunty Helen.
Erica, thank you for that introduction, that kind introduction. Some of you might know I can't do a welcome to country. I am not of this country. I am what they call a Murray. I come from Queensland, and my tribal groupings are I'm a Berry-Double woman from the Bindle Group, which is basically up there in North Queensland, near Townsville and Inwards. I have direct family ties into the Cherbourg Aboriginal Mission, which is a couple of hours north of Brisbane, and I'm also directly related into the Wappa Wappa mob from up that way too. I have been down here in Victoria for the past approximately 50 years, and the Kulin Nations people have looked after me. My daughters were born here, my grannies, and it'll be a place where I will not be going back to Queensland. I will be dying here in this country. The acknowledgement of country. As we gather here at Mount Eliza on this sacred land, let us together acknowledge that we are standing on country which the Aboriginal nations and their ancestors have been custodians for thousands of years. Land on which, in this area, is the Bunurong people and the Bunurong people, and it's the wider Kulin nations of Victoria. They have performed in this area and on the peninsula age-old ceremonies, celebrations, initiations, and renewals. We here on this day acknowledge their living culture and unique role in our area. And we respectfully acknowledge their elders past and present, and also to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples of other nations who now call Victoria home. I'd now like to acknowledge two of my beautiful elders here, Aunty Pats and Aunty Yvonne, in the audience. And I would also like to acknowledge, if there's someone in this audience, an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person, you have come from around Australia and you now call Victoria and the Mornington Peninsula your home. I respectfully acknowledge the young emerging leaders, and we've got one from Willamaraine. She's hiding out somewhere up there. Where's Tanisha? Hello, honey bunny, from Willamaraine. We respectfully acknowledge the young emerging leaders of this time and wish them well, following in the footsteps of their elders and uniquely forging ahead in their own way to make a footprint here within Mornington Peninsula and here in Willamaraine. NAIDOC week. Firstly, let me get out of the way. Can we please clap Ash? Can't we just clap her? Yes. Right. 25 85 years old. She's a Murray, banana vendor. Oh yeah, I'll take that one. I could say, oh, she's a cousin. No. How wonderful was that young woman, and so gracious, humble and dignified. And to think in the French Open she was injured and she got up with the help of her support team. How wonderful also that Paddy Mills, the Torres Strait Islander basketballer, has been chosen as the flag bearer for the Tokyo Olympics. Two beautiful Aboriginal people from this country. And what? All in NAIDOC week? Hello, what's happening here? Where's the vibrations taking us? It is my pleasure to be able to just have a yarn with you today. You know the NAIDOC 2021 theme, Heal Country. It invites the nation to embrace First Nations cultural knowledge and understanding of country as part of Australia's national heritage, and equally respect the culture and values of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in this land. It's not only just wishy-washy words. This year's theme seeks substantive, institutionalised, structural and collaborative reform, something that generations of elders, ones who are present here and others who have gone, have been advocating for, marching and fighting for, healing country for many, many years. It is about hearing and actioning the aspirations of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who have consulted and discussed and talked to government and lots of layers of government. A few things have changed, but I'm telling you it's coming to an end, and I need your help as good non-Aboriginal women of wisdom and knowledge, and I'll point the way where I think that we need to go. You make up your own minds. What does it mean to be an Aussie? To be an Australian? I'd like to give you an example of the early 1800s, and to me, that's what it means to be an Australian, working together, different cultures, different religions coming together. I'm going to use the example of the Garn Railway. You know, the railway that goes the longest passenger train in the world, and it goes from Adelaide up to Darwin. For some of you who do not know, in the 1860s, who were the people who put down the tracks to that beautiful train, that beautiful railway, so popular all around the world? Firstly, were you aware that the surveyors used Aboriginal people from the local areas to point the way in which the train track's supposed to go? So they were the Aboriginal surveyors. Next there were, at that time, navvies or European people who were the workers. They constructed the railway along with the Afghani people who came up that way in the territory in South Australia, Alice Springs Way. They brought in the camels. Some of you are nodding, you understand that. The horses were no good in that dry, rough country. They brought in about nearly 200 camels from Karachi. Along with it come approximately about 55 Indian people, Indian men, Pakistani men, men from Iran, to also work on the railways but open up the continent up that way. The next lot of people who came in to form Australia were the Chinese people. They were used on the railway, discriminated against on the railway because they worked long hours for very little pay. To a large degree, because of them, the White Australia policy was then put in place in Federation. I love that show. So all those different cultures, religions, food. The Afghani people built the first mosque up there in a place called Marlow. Muslim, beautiful Muslim people. Let alone open the outback to help with the trades and get to the pastoral stations. I love that show, you know, on SBS, the one Who Do You Think You Are? Who watches that? Yeah, I do too. I'm fascinated by it. I'm fascinated by it. Australian people, well-known people go on that show and they're Aussies, but they're looking for the other jigsaw puzzle that makes them who they are now. Here in Australia, we have the layers of peoples who've come to make us up. You're sitting here too. Firstly, we have the First Nations people of Australia. Next, through the colonisation, we have the British people and others, and we have our constitution. Next, we have the third layer of immigrants who've made us up. And fourthly, we have the descendants of immigrants. 4 layers. From the time of the Constitution in 1901, a British system, Indigenous people were not consulted, were not mentioned. We do know that Australia's constitution is based on a British constitutional principles, starting with the Magna Carta. Aboriginal people, then and now, are not mentioned. Some say the Constitution, our Australian Constitution, is like a rule book. It's procedural, pragmatic. It's a charter of government of rules. So when the colonisation took place, the 6 states, all individual, the Constitution and Canberra later then just split it all up, who's responsible for who. Some people say, we've heard enough about Aboriginal grievances. What do they want? Well, I'll tell you what we want, and it's very clear. And in 2017, 250 of my mob met up in Uluru, up in Alice, for the Statement of the Heart. Do you know it? Do you want me to read it out? Because people keep asking, what do Aboriginal people want? It's right before your face. We've been telling people, ever so politely, that there hasn't been a voice, that voice hasn't been heard. So, bear with me. In May 2017, around 250 150 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people from all the countries in Australia, from all the nations, got together up in Israel, Uluru. They came together, and for quite a few days they thrashed out, well, what do we want here? What are we going to give the Australian people and the government something to tell them what we want, reach the consensus? It was thrashed out. There were 7 dissenters, and the dissenters come from Victoria, some of whom have changed their minds. This is the statement from the heart. It's a gift to all Australians. We gathered at the 2017 National Constitutional Convention, coming from all points of the southern sky, to make this statement from our hearts. From our heart. Our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander tribes were the first sovereign nations of the Australian continent and its adjacent lands. And we possess this continent under our own laws and customs. This our ancestors did according to the reckoning of our culture from the creation, according to the common law from time immemorial, and according to science. More than 60,000 years ago. The sovereignty is a spiritual notion, the ancestral tie between the land or Mother Nature and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who were born therefrom, remained attached to, and must one day return thither to be united with our ancestors. The link is the basis of the ownership of the soil, or better, of the sovereignty. It has never, and I repeat, it has never been ceded by Aboriginal people or extinguished, and we coexist with the sovereignty of the Crown. How could it be otherwise that peoples possessed a land for more than 60 millennium years, and in this sacred land disappears from world history in a mere 230 years? With substantive constitutional change and structural reform, we believe this ancient sovereignty can shine through as a fuller expression of Australia's nationhood. Proportionately, we're the most incarcerated people. These dimensions of our crises tell plainly the structural nature of our problem here. This is the torment of our powerlessness. We seek constitutional reforms to empower our people and take a rightful place in our own country. When we have power over our destiny, our children will flourish. They will walk in 2 worlds, and their culture will be a gift to their country. This is what we want. Here it comes. We call for the establishment of the First Nations voice enshrined in the Constitution. Makarrata is the culmination of our agenda, the coming together after a struggle. It captures our aspirations for a fair and truthful relationship with the people of Australia and a better future for our children based on justice and self-determination. Secondly, we seek a Makarrata Commission to supervise a process of agreement making between governments and First Nations and truth-telling about our history. That's a big one, to tell the truth. A lot of people don't want to know that we had a white Australia policy in here, in our democratic country. The truth-telling, I know it hurts, but to heal, you can have all the flowery words that you like about the NAIDOC thing, to heal our country, all of our country, your country, your children, your grandchildren, your great-grannies and your friends. We need to tell the truth. In 1967, we were counted. In 2017, we seek to be heard. You and I know that you can use your voice, you can tell someone in a relationship, in a partnership, in a marriage, they don't hear. Well, I tell you what, we're getting sick of it. To heal Australia, we need to own up to the truth and move on. And we can work together. We seek to be heard. We leave base camp and start our trek across this vast country. We invite you to walk with us in a movement of the Australian people for a better future. That was in 2017. And then it was slapped around. Remember, Malcolm Turnbull was the Prime Minister? He rejected the Uluru Statement. We'll go on. Truth. Lies were told. Third arm in the Parliament. No, not in the Constitution. No. Barnaby Joyce had his say up there, spreading it around, if you know what I mean. The untruth. What I hold on to, and I'll tell you what I personally, I've done as much reading as I can, but at that time with the rejection and Aboriginal people on a high, and then think, oh, here we go. Not again, but we stand resilient. What I like, and I take favour with, it makes sense to me, is the Referendum Council report. It came out in June 2017. Well, it backed the Uluru Statement. It called for a constitutionally guaranteed Indigenous Advisory Board, a body, and added the idea of a declaration outside the Constitution to recognise the three parts of our national story. Practical reform to establish a voice within the Constitution, symbolic language outside the Constitution. So, it's not about ripping the Constitution to pieces. There's a lot of constitutional peoples who say, leave our document alone. Okay, got it, but we can sit beside you. I think in the Referendum Council's report, it found to achieve Indigenous aspirations for substantive, empowering reform while upholding the Constitution. If you need to know more about the Constitution, it is heavy reading. I've got a couple of books which I'll give you the name, and I'll give Erica the name that she can put up on the Swan website. What I think how to do it. Through good non-Indigenous support, we got over the line the 1967 referendum, didn't we, here in Australia? with good non-Aboriginal support. It was a landmark achievement for Australia. And that followed decades of activism by Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people, where over 90% of Australians voted in favour of amending a couple of sections of the Australian Constitution. The 1967 referendum did not remedy the Constitution's failure to recognise the unique status of Australia's Indigenous people as the original inhabitants of the land. I know that referendums are hard to pull up and pull out and get going. I think we're up to it now. We've reached the stage in Australia. Referendums as of 2020, there have been 44 nationwide referendums. Only 8 have been carried. Out of those 44, there have been 19 where they've tried to make constitutional amendments. I get it, I know it's going to be a bit difficult. It is common in the constitutional referendums to have multiple questions on the ballot. So doesn't it make sense to not only have questions, whoever designs that, the people of Australia need to know what Aboriginal people want. Again, look up the Uluru Statement of the Heart, and for Aboriginal people to have a say in the laws that affect them. Other countries that have included their Indigenous people in the Constitution, so New Zealand, of course, the Maoris, Canada, Scandinavian countries like Finland, Norway, and Sweden, for their Sami people. We're different here. I know we get compared to the Maoris and say, well, they're doing so much better than the Aboriginal people, and they've got language, they've got signage, they've got parliamentary rights. Again, look into the Treaty of Waitangi and what was negotiated straight from the treaty. We've never had a treaty here in Australia. It was negotiated out that Māoris get so many seats in the parliament. Did the Māori people have the mass colonisation of normally white convicts, males, who came in to their country? Did New Zealand have the strict protection laws like Australia did to remove kids, to, via the protection laws and other laws, take away Aboriginal people's land, move them off their countries, put them on Aboriginal missions and reserves? Did they have in New Zealand the laws that took the kids away? No, it's different. I've dealt with the Apaches and also the Navajo in New Mexico and Canada. They had their treaties right from the start. They negotiated right from the start. We haven't had that. It's time for us now. If we've got on the international stage Ash Barty and that other beautiful man, world stage acknowledging, oh, Indigenous people, yes, it was during NAIDOC they did all this. What does it mean to be an Australian here? Healing starts to have to happen for us. For all of us here, for your families, for your friends, for your grannies and your great-grannies. First, we acknowledge the First Nations people, legislatively. I need your help. Aboriginal Australians need your help. We have to work together in unity to start getting the government and pushing them for a referendum in regards to what Aboriginal people want in this country. Not much to ask for. In the Constitution, besides the Constitution, walking together, I need us to walk together. I know we can do it, and I know down here with Swan and the Peninsula, lots of good things are happening. I've got a couple of resources, I'll explain those and I'll give them to Erica. You need to educate yourself and you need to educate your families and friends over dinner parties, over family reunions and get-togethers. Firstly, this is called the Forgotten People, Liberal and Conservative Approaches to Recognising Indigenous Peoples. Damien Freeman and Shireen Morris. Shireen is a constitutional lawyer. Her parents live locally here on the peninsula. They're GPs. Secondly, for your kids and your grannies in this area, you hound those schools, and this is what you ask them to put into the library. Finding Our Heart, a story about the Uluru Statement for Young Australians by Thomas Mayer and illustrated by Black Douglas. I know you're madly writing there. I'm going to give this to you. Well, you're going to send it out to all the SWAT women and everything. It is a beautiful book. And it explains what the Uluru Statement is. It came out, I think last year I bought it. Yeah, it's from down at Robertson's bookstore, $25. A book about understanding Australia's past so we can have a shared future. A shared future. What you withhold from and what you withheld from the First Nations people. We all suffer. We all suffer. So there are the two books, and one of my other hats is I work for Peninsula Health, proudly so. So I've been there 9 years, so I work in an executive capacity, but also like a senior social worker too, so I'm still on the grassroots level on occasions with my mom. One of my roles as the executive prior to COVID-19 was that during orientation times, a couple of times a year, like we've got 6,500 employees up at Peninsula Health. We have 900 volunteers. So when COVID struck, the face-to-face stuff stopped happening. So I put my thinking cap on and I thought, one way to do it for me to get out about what happens here on the peninsula was I'll get an Aboriginal film company in. They can film me talking about Australian Indigenous history. So that's what I did. So that, it's called An Introduction to Australian Indigenous History by Aunty Helen Bnads. Only 34 minutes. I said to Peninsula Health, that's for our new staff who come into Peninsula Health, but I want a deal here that that video goes out to the public so they can have a look at it. No cost involved, no copyright stuff. It's too complicated. I wanted, in my own way, and the truth-telling, to start here at Peninsula Health and on the Mornington Peninsula. So, you just have to go on YouTube and you can view it in your own time. So, how I've done it is pre-colonisation, colonisation, and the effects, the European mindset at the time that made it okay, that thinking that yes, we're taking over a land, terra nullius, no one's here. It's called the Great Change of Being. Lastly, there's a poem I'm going to read you, and it's from Joyce Johnson Rouse. Do you know her, the American lady? Oh, it's a little one, and it makes sense to me. It's called Standing on the Shoulders. It's for you, it's for me, it crosses racial boundaries, cultural stuff. I am standing on the shoulders of the ones who came before me. I'm stronger for their courage. I am wiser for their words. I am lifted by their longing for a fair and brighter future. I'm grateful for their vision, for their toiling on this earth. We are standing on the shoulders of the ones who came before us. They are saints, and they are humans, they are angels, they are friends. We can see beyond the struggles and the troubles and the challenge when we know that by our efforts things will be better in the end. I am standing on the shoulders of the ones who came before me. I am honoured by their passion for our liberty. I will stand a little taller. I will work a little longer, and my shoulders will be there to hold the ones who follow me. Thank you.